We're in the sixth chapter of the Revelation. Incredible events that are happening. We remember God talks about these, well, we call them the four horsemen, that are going to be the first four of the seals that are opened up. So we have the white horse, red horse, black horse, and then the pale horse. Each one of these are going to be bringing something, everything from war, the civil wars, extended wars, rumors of wars, as Jesus talked about in Matthew 24, 6 and 7. We looked at the famine that is going to be taking place, and how God is going to be taking that which is for food and rationings. It's going to be very, very difficult to work a day, and basically you get enough food for the day. And then the pale horse had to do with more of the sword, the famine, and the problems that are going to be coming onto the earth again. And this is where it tells us a quarter of the world's population at that time will die. I gave those numbers that we're at 7.2 billion, and then by 2050 they're looking at 9.6. And after I gave those numbers, Cameron, Jim, he comes up to me, he goes, you got to remember that there is a portion of the world's population that will be raptured before that. So we do have to deduct the Christians from those numbers too. I'm like, amen, brother. I'm just glad somebody's listening. That's all I'm saying. Somebody's listening and they're reasoning with me, so that's always a good thing. I love that. And so that's absolutely right. And it is interesting to think that way because, we had these thoughts that when rapture takes place, planes are going to be crashing because of Christian pilots, and, we have all the thoughts of horror that are going to be happening, thinking is going to be happening when we're gone, and I'm sure a lot of that is true. But I still am of the opinion that when you look at the majority of the world, you look at the large populations of China and India, and the list goes on, how few Christians live there. When you're dealing with 1% or less than a lot of the Muslim countries, the impact there is going to be so small. And we're always thinking, of course, America, and we think, half America is going to be gone, right? Well, I don't know that we're going to be have an impact on the nation that much either, but time will tell. And I don't know what's going to happen. When you look at the study as we did with the last days, and we get closer and closer to that rapture, we are already seeing the spirit of Antichrist working and manifesting itself already. And we sometimes think immediately of world leaders in the U.S., even the political leaders, and how they are going to be part of all that. And I agree with that. I think that it extends way past, though, the people that right now are looking at Christians and they're saying, we're in the way, we should be paying taxes, and we should allow the gay and lesbian movement, and we should applaud that and embrace it instead of not agreeing with that. One politician said if he gets in that's one of the first things he's going to do is any church that doesn't agree with that and embrace it should be paying taxes then. So they're planting the seed. Even if it doesn't happen now, that's what they do, is they plant the seed. Now it's out there, and people are going to be thinking, yeah, why don't they? They got these big properties, and why aren't they paying taxes? They have all this income coming in. Why aren't they paying the tax like everybody else? And so, it's interesting. Why don't we? So you got to look back at the fathers who established why we don't. And it's based on Scripture. The thought of the priests, etc. They would not pay in; they were recipients. And so there's a biblical reason why our government established itself the way it did, and even down to that. So we're the ones that are anti-abortion, and We're trying to say the sanctity of the home is one man, one woman, have children. It's the most natural thing. And they feel that we hate, and we don't. It seems like it's the other way around, that we are hated. Because we don't hate them. We want them saved. We pray for them all the time. But it does seem like we are in the way of what they determine is the best for our nation and around the world. So we're just waiting. Things are going to be progressing. And, as I see it, every, church era, you're going to see, like the Church of Smyrna, you have the persecution that's happening to the churches. But I really feel that sometimes God allows the persecution to come to the church, and you say, that doesn't seem fair. Well, that's what he talks about, if it be the will of the Lord, and Peter talks about if the will of the Lord be that we suffer for doing right, that's okay, because God has a purpose in it all. And when you look at the book of Acts, persecution that came to the church, not only refined the church and purified it, but also created an incredible witness to the world. They were shining brighter as a result of the persecution. So I could imagine in my mind that God would allow the church closer to rapture to be going through some more suffering. And we have to highlight this. Remember, persecution is not the tribulation time period. Sometimes we think, we're being persecuted, so therefore we're in the trib. Trust me, what we're studying right now isn't even close to what we think of as church persecution. I mean, it is so small compared to what the world will be going through. And that's why these people that sell books and say we're already in the tribulation time period, I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know what scriptures they're pulling together to prove that, because everything we have read, I have yet to see a quarter of the world's population die. You follow me? It doesn't make sense that those things are intact. We don't have the third temple up and running. We don't have, the list goes on with so many things that have to be up and running for us to be already in the trib. And that's why, again, I believe, as I've shared before, why we're out of here before all this starts. So we've been talking about that. And then last week we had a chance to look at verses 9 to 11, talking about the souls under the altar and the burden that are on these tribulation saints that have already been killed for their faith and incredible faithfulness. We think what these dear Christians are going to have to go through is brutal. When we look at what we have, we think we have it hard. These believers, having the small churches and probably churches in homes and churches out in the middle of nowhere where nobody can find them, and they're singing with no instruments, and they just get together. And it's not about all of this. It's about this. The whole fellowship between Christians. And I really think, to be truthful, any church can get so locked into the traditions and really forget what fellowship is really all about, how important the prayer will be then. It's going to take on a whole new meaning when we really they will pray for one another because of the persecution. And, the announcement, hey, we lost another family over here, or, so-and-so's children turned them in, and now they're in jail. We need to pray that they can get out and that they're not killed. And I can't imagine what the prayer requests are going to be like during that time period. Yeah. So these are begging, how long, O God, until this happens? You remember, as I mentioned this morning, we're dealing with the tears in heaven, not you and I, the church age. This is the tribulation saints that are bringing these prayers and these tears before the Lord. And I believe I can make, in my mind, a distinction between them and ourselves in the request that is going on. And we saw Revelation 7, where God indeed, and we'll get to that again, that text again, where God is going to take these tribulation saints and He is going to comfort them. He's going to give them water. He's going to give them drink and food. And they're never, ever going to be just out in the wilderness, not sure how they're going to eat, drink, where they're, getting out of the sun, and the constant everyday burdens that these dear people are going to be going through. And Jesus says, I'm going to comfort you from now on. You are never, ever going to want for anything ever again. Just like Lazarus, who was poor, just begging for anything. And then God says, and he is in paradise in the Old Testament, holding place. And he said, and guess what? He's comforted now. He's ministered to. And that's what we got to remember, too, for ourselves. We do have suffering that happens. And what we got to remember is God is knowing these hardships, and there will be a day when he himself will comfort us in an incredible way. And so keep on keeping on, serving the Lord, because that comfort absolutely will come one day. So we're at the top of page 39 now. And we'll read the text in just a moment. I just want to read point 8 into point number 9 then. Page 39 to top, point 8. These saints are given white robes representing their righteousness, salvation, and victory, which they have accomplished while on earth. And you'll know also that God talks about you and I having white robes. And it's a picture of purity, that God has delivered us, saved us, and washed us with his own precious blood. And we have the position. We were doing some studies, the men's retreat. I think I was doing some of my own. Also, how you remember King Saul, his son Jonathan would have been next in line. And of course, because of Saul's sin, God says, I'm going to take and choose a man after my own heart, a man better than you, Saul, and I'm going to be putting him in place. You would have been the king forever, but now it's going to be this new one coming on the scene. So, of course, David is that one. It's interesting that early on, Jonathan's heart was knit towards David, but it also tells us he gave him his robe. It's a thought of, I'm yielding my position over to you. You're the man, and I'm behind this. And there's something about that clothing that is given to represent a position. And that's exactly what God is saying to you and I. We have been given his righteousness, and they also will be given the same exact thing, because they will be saved the exact same way that we are, the same way that the Old Testament saints were, always by faith, believing. Old Testament, looking forward to the one that was coming. We look back at the one that came, and the tribulation saints will be doing the same, remembering and knowing by the word of God who Jesus Christ is, that he gave himself for them. Point number 9, the sixth seal is opened in verses 12 to 17. Again, we'll read this in a moment. The earth, as well as the atmosphere, will begin to collapse. The scene which Jesus gave in Matthew 24 begins to unfold. There will be earthquakes, the sun darkened, the moon turns to the color of blood, meteors fall to earth, and the firmament will change due to God moving all the elements. This is incredible catastrophe that is going to be global, not just localized in a specific region, but all around the earth. It is going to be moved, and which is obviously going to be changing everything. So let's go ahead and read it in chapter number 6, starting verse number 12. And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and though there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it was rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. And the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the chief captains, the mighty men, every bondman, every free man, hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains of rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. They knew, they will know, for the great day of the wrath of his wrath is come, And who shall be able to stand? Lord, when we read texts so powerful as this, it does cause us to stop and say, God, how mighty and powerful you are. Your first power was demonstrated when you made all things from nothing. And it is by your own power that you will methodically begin to destroy that which you originally created, to reveal to man that which you created for him. You can quickly take it away, that all safety will be gone. Fear will be in their hearts and minds. So, Lord, help us, because of this, to remember to share your incredible word. May we live it in front of others, that we will see many come to know Christ. Thank you for this time. And thank you again, Lord, I must bring it up. Thank you for saving us from the wrath to come. In Jesus' name, amen. I don't know how many years ago it was, but I remember we were on Fox Court at the time. We lived there, and I remember this. Remember those things that they had these little hangers and you put plates on them? Ladies like to decorate with them, you know what I mean? You ladies know what I'm talking about. And you hang them. Well, all of a sudden, those plates on the wall that are hanging going ding, 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 ding. I'm like, what's up with that? Then you find out there was this little earthquake that was going on in the area. And I'm like, that's kind of cool. And, of course, that was like, well, that's cool. We went through one. I was so horrified, you know what I mean? I'm like, this is cool. These won't be. These are going to bring an incredible fear around everywhere. As I mentioned earlier, globally, places that normally would not have them will. It's interesting, these earthquakes that are mentioned will be worldwide earthquakes. And as we know, so many times when they're in diverse places and the things are shaking, for instance, tsunamis that can happen. One man brought up that because of these cracks in the earth, etc., many believe that volcanoes will then begin to erupt as a result of everything being shaken. Those wonderful people that love to live in Hawaii, a bad place to be living in. Can you imagine what these islands are going to be going through when we see this old earth going? And these islands are just, everything is just going to be shifted and moved, and people are going to be like, where can we run? Where could we hide? And the most natural place to go to will be in a cave, in somewhere where they can be under the really strongholds of mountains. And so they're going to be in there. It's like, cover us up, so that we don't die. It's interesting how many times earthquakes are mentioned in the Revelation. Quite a few. I'm going to give them to you. We see this one. Look over at chapter 8 and verse 5. Chapter 8, verse 5. And the seventh angel, now we're going forward into the next, the seventh seal, getting into the trumpets. And it says, the seventh angels, which had the seven trumpets, prepared. I'm sorry, I went too far. I'm sorry, been a long day. Verse 5, I apologize. And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire on the altar and cast it to the earth, and there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. It's as though these things are happening all the time. 11:13. 11:13. And the same hour was there a great earthquake, and the 10th part of the city fell. Wow. Walls are crumbling. And the earthquake were slain of men 7,000, and the remnant were affrighted, and gave glory to the God of heaven. Same chapter, verse number 19. And the temple of God was opened in heaven, and there was a scene in his temple, the ark of his testament, and there were lightnings and voices, thunderings, and an earthquake, and great hail. Oh, we're not done yet. Look over chapter 16, and then verse 18. 16:18. you'll notice a flow again here, and there were voices and thunders and lightning. So you can also see that these are associated with the earthquakes. And there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. So now this last one, and you'll see within the text, we're dealing with Armageddon, the battle at Megiddo, in this text. And so we're dealing here in this chapter with the end. You'll notice that this seems to be intensifying, but this earthquake is highlighted. Never one like it. And I'm sure many who have gone through, and we've seen them, this day and age. Some of you remember some of those video feeds, live feeds of earthquakes, and you're watching walls crumbling and falling in different places. And what these poor people go through, and people are running and screaming, and they just don't know what to do. This earthquake is going to be topping all of the others, and are going to cause thousands of people to die. Walls are going to be collapsing. These things that are thick, made to last, will never be able to withstand. Now, it's interesting, this one, because this one is the one we want to highlight. We would see this as the last earthquake. And you say, why is it so intense? That's the question. Why is this one harsher than all of those that were before? And we're going to show you why. Want to go back with me to the book of Zechariah. And we're going to go to the 14th chapter. We're going to start in verse number 1 to show again how God is going to be building towards Christ's coming. Zechariah 14:1. Behold, the day of the Lord cometh. Pause. Now, why would we need to pause there? There's a key phrase there, isn't there, when it comes to eschatology? The day of the Lord. You'll remember early on, we went through all of these phrases to give you definition of what does God mean by that. So, it's a twofold purpose of the day of the Lord. Number one is to destroy. Isaiah, many other places, the day of the Lord is going to be bringing destruction. But what we got to remember is the destruction is towards the lost. Secondly, the day of the Lord is to save the righteous, just like the day of Noah. The righteous were saved by the same waters that destroyed the world. So the day of the Lord is going to wipe out the bad, establish the good. And so the day of the Lord is not rapture. Get rapture out of your brain. Because there's not going to be all of this catastrophe happening when the rapture happens. There's one simple thing going to happen. We're out of here. We're gone. That's the effect on the earth. There's no storms and lightnings and thunderings and voices and earthquakes and blood moons, etc. None of that is associated with rapture in any of the clear texts that talk about rapture. But it is constantly there when God tells us about, but the day of the Lord. Total different subject. That's where we're at. It's coming. And thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee, for I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. This is futuristic. And the city shall be taken, the houses rifled, the women ravished. Half the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city then. Phase 2. That was phase 1. Phase 2. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations when he fought in the, as when he fought in the day of battle. Notice what happens in verse 4 when the Lord comes to fight for his people. Verse 4. and his feet, this is phase 3, by the way, and his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave or split in the midst thereof toward the east and toward the west, and there shall be a very great valley. Half the mountain shall be removed toward the north, and half of it toward the south. So it is going to be split, divided. So east-west is the division, and it's going to be spreading out north-south. And so what we just read in Revelation in chapter number 16 and verse 18 is when Jesus comes back. This quake, it's as though Christ puts his foot down and just splits it. I agree with one man. He said, it's the earthquake that will be felt around the world, starting right there. You remember in the book of Acts, at the time of the ascension in chapter number 1, you remember where Jesus left from? Mount of Olives. And so he ascended from there. And you'll remember, I was talking to, we were at the Wardingers last night for suppers. Their kids are just awesome. And their oldest son, he had lots of questions for the preacher. It was about rapture, and it was about last day stuff, And I got to teach them a little bit, and amazing. It was on creation, and it was really a great time. And so I was talking to him about this text, and I asked him, I said, now he's like 7 years old, I think. Is that right, Lori? 7 years old. So I asked him, I said, Jesus died how many days until he rose again? 3 days later. I said, do you remember how long Jesus was on the earth after the resurrection? He said, 40 days. And he knew all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm in trouble. So as I'm going on and talking, I started to explain this whole text to him. I said, remember how the disciples were there with Jesus, and Jesus gave them the commission to go and preach the gospel, and all power is going to be given unto them to share the gospel. The Spirit of God is going to come. And then suddenly Christ started to ascend up into heaven in front of these men. And they all stood, and I said, you know what they would have been doing? And that's what it says. They gazed up into the sky. You can almost imagine their jaws just dropping as they're watching the Messiah lifted and going up into the air. And he kept on asking this question. How can he do that? How can he take us there? And how can he take us up in the air? How is that going to happen? And I'm like, well, the God who created everything from nothing has the power to lift us up. Okay. He just needed that. Okay, it's all God doing it. And it is God doing it all. And this incredible rapture we first talked about, the lifting up of the saints, is going to be incredible. But his arrival back to this earth, when he hits, that's why, remember in Matthew 24, he talks about, now listen, if somebody says, hey, the Messiah is over here, or the Messiah is over there, don't believe them. And this is why, when Jesus comes back, there's not going to be anybody questioning, I wonder if that's really him. It is going to be, it is him. No doubt, no question, and he will arrive in majesty. He's going to arrive in power. He's going to be arriving on the white horse, ready for battle. And it starts right here. When we were there, and it is a beautiful sight, this mount, and to be able to look over to the city. Sadly, you see the Dome of the Rock as a point of reference. But, one day, that's not going to be there anymore. Jesus is going to be taken over. And so he starts right there at this mount. And it's the witness that Zechariah gets to when he talks about they in Jerusalem are going to see the one, and they're going to ask that question about, where did those wounds come from? How did that all happen? And then they're going to realize he is Jesus, and they're going to believe in him. I think it's a third of the population that will exist at that time period of the Jews will believe. And then from there, he goes up to the Jezreel Valley. And then this Megiddo, this whole battle, is going to be commenced. And it's going to be, again, a very one-sided battle. Jesus wins, the lost lose. The nations that are going to be coming to battle, and we're going to see this where the Euphrates is going to be dried up, and they're going to be able, there's not going to be any hindrance for these nations to come from all angles to be able to come to this battle. And the Antichrist is going to say, come on, let's go to battle. It's time for this fight. And it will be raging, and Christ himself will end it all. And it all starts with the earthquake. When he comes down, and throughout the trib, there will be many of these earthquakes, but this will be the one that's going to end it all. Go with me now to the book of Matthew 24 again. And we're going to be going through this text down the road, verse by verse. You'll have the notes of how we're going to be studying this out. What is Matthew 24 really all about? Again, it's been probably one of the most misused portions of Scripture in my mind through the years by well-intending teachers and pastors, but they try to make this chapter all about rapture. And rapture doesn't make any sense in this text. But Christ dealing with the nation of Israel does make sense. And that's what we see, is Christ explaining to the elect people, the people of Israel, how they're going to be able to survive and live throughout it. So in 24 and verse number 7, he says, and nation shall rise against nation. Remember what we read back there in Zechariah? Nations coming around and battling, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines, pestilence, and here it is, earthquakes. Now notice this, in diverse or different places. The thought is, we never had one there before. There were no faults. There was no reason for there to be an earthquake in that specific location. And so it is going to be changing the course of nature. And again, as we go back to the text, when we talk about this earth being shaken so badly that islands and everything are going to be shifted, and it's as though just you imagine out west in California, all these regions, I can imagine East Coast even along the ocean line. Everybody wants to live along the ocean. Have fun with that one. Did you ever notice this? Like, I'm not saying this in a negative way. It's just most people that are going to be building or living there, most likely they're going to be rich, because that's the premier place that people want to live. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just making a statement that, that's where they're going to be. It's interesting that he highlights that back where we were at about these rich people that are going to be fleeing for their lives because that's where they're at. And so that's, in my mind, how that's going to work out. Then we look at something else concerning this time period. Look with me, first of all, to the book of Acts in chapter 2. And I'm going to explain to you a little bit about prophecy in this text. So we're in Acts in chapter number 2. We're going to begin in verse number 16 in just a moment. So, Acts 2, the day of Pentecost. Jesus has resurrected. He was on the earth 40 days, and then 10 days after this is the time of Pentecost. So as the disciples are waiting for the promise of the Father, which is the Spirit of God coming down, he did, and they were able to speak in foreign language with no education to these Jews that had come from all around the world to Jerusalem. And so they're hearing these disciples. It says they heard them, in other words, multiple disciples, speaking the language, the native language of these people from all around the world. And they're like, how could you be speaking this language that I learned that when I was a kid back here? You couldn't have known that. And they couldn't understand. Well, that was the gift of tongues. That's what the gift of tongues was. And again, it was for the Jews in order to hear the gospel. That's what tongues was intended for. And so as this happened, of course, the Jews are like, something's crazy going on here. This could never happen. Okay, maybe they're drunk. Maybe they're just babbling. And like, no, they're not drunk. It's kind of not that time of the day that normal people would be drunk. And then he begins to explain it. He goes to a reference, you're at the right place, but he actually begins to quote Joel 2 in Acts 2. Joel 2 prophesied about this event that took place in Acts 2. So, verse 16. This is that which was spoken by the prophet Joel, that's Joel 2:28 and following. And it shall come to pass in the last days. Now we got to stop again. So when we think of last days, sometimes people think of the day of the Lord when all this catastrophe is going to be happening. That's part of it, but that's not what the phrase last days are all about. Because God says, according to this text, we know that the last days started here in Acts 2, and it continues on through. Last days is reference to even and Peter, he talks about the last days in reference to the destruction of the earth and the new heaven and the new earth. So it's like eschatology. It's all the future and what's happening now and going forward. So this phrase has to do with the events that God is doing on earth that are designed by God himself. And this is what God says he's going to do in the last days. I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. Your sons, your daughters shall prophesy. Your young men shall see visions. Your old men shall dream dreams. By the way, that happened. Even throughout the book of Acts, those things happened. That was the beginning of the last days. Matter of fact, you say, what do you mean about the dreams? Remember in Acts chapter number 10, God gave that vision through a dream to Peter, and how the animals came down, and God says, eat them. And he's like, no, I don't eat unclean animals. And God reveals to him through this dream, don't call that which I have declared or made clean, don't call them unclean. Talking about you and I, the Gentiles. So this was a vision. That's the stuff that was going on in the book of Acts, because the word of God was not yet complete. All my servants, verse 18, my handmaids, I will pour out in those days my spirit, and they shall prophesy. And that happened. You look at the women, the men who were used in incredible ways to proclaim and to share the word of God in the book of Acts, and it's just incredible. Now notice a change now. And I will show wonders in heaven above and signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapor and smoke. Did that happen in the book of Acts? Nope. But it's going to during the tribulation time period. So we have a prophecy in Joel 2 that was partially fulfilled on the day of Pentecost. The rest of it will be fulfilled right before Jesus comes back to earth. So this last days gives us this whole scope of church age to the tribulation time period. So now these last days, and that's what we're talking about, the blood, the blood and the fire, vapor and smoke, the sun shall be turned into darkness. Jesus said that in Matthew in chapter 24. And it's going to happen again in Revelation chapter number 6. The moon into blood before that great and notable, here it is, day of the Lord come. So day of the Lord is not rapture. Day of the Lord is God's bringing wrath down. And he's going to do two things. He's going to destroy the wicked, and he's going to save the righteous. So the day of the Lord is going to be bringing this judgment for the lost. The world is going to be shown who's really boss, and then the believers are going to be rescued. And what we thank God for is through these judgments of the day of the Lord, many non-believers will become believers because of these signs and wonders. So it's not like they're all lost and can't get saved. because we're going to see in the next chapter, there's an incredible amount of people that are going to be saved during the tribulation time period. So therefore, some of this is going to work. Some are going to say, I fear God. I'm going to believe in him no matter what. And you know that has to be part of their thinking. I'm going to get saved no matter what. That could mean that they're going to be separated from their family. They might be turned in by their family. They're going to lose their job. They're going to lose resources. And they're going to pay for it. I've often thought, I wonder where my heart would have been if I knew that day when I heard the gospel at that church and heard Pastor Kimbrough preaching the gospel. I wonder if I knew in my mind, if I become a Christian and believe all of that, I'm going to lose my job, I'm going to lose my family, and I could literally become homeless. Would I have believed? I don't know what my heart would have been thinking, how I would have justified that one thing of believing in Jesus that will alter my entire life if I would have believed. I don't know. But that never was in my mind. Was it in your mind? When you invited Christ in, I never thought of rejection, losing benefits, losing money, losing family, losing everything that is dear to me. I never thought of losing. And yet, God tells us if a man loses his life, he's really going to be gaining. These people, that's what he's targeting. Yep, you may lose your life, but you're going to gain eternal life as a result. Not that their sacrifice gave it, it's what they believed in that gave them the eternal life. But it definitely caused them to take up their cross. It will cause them to take up their cross in a different way. These texts humble me because of how good I have it. Because we've got it made. And yet I still find something to complain about. And it's so sad that we're never, as I talked about this morning, content and joyful and reflecting the real character of who we are and who we belong to and the benefits that have come from God. It's so sad. And that's why Christ singles these people out, saying, yep, you died, you gave your life, you were not ashamed of me. And now that you've died and now that you are in heaven, you are never going to think, I'm thirsty again. You're never going to be thinking, I wish I had a piece of bread to just fill my belly. They will never, ever, ever hunger again. And that's where their hope was Christ's presence to be nurtured and fed. And spiritually, they're going to be fed. And it's, yeah. I wish I could shout this to the world. You know what I'm saying? Because their view of God, of Christ, of Christianity is so skewed by what they think of us, what the world says, what Hollywood says, what the media says of us. And we're always made out to be the hypocrites, the bad people. And it's sad. I wish they could see this and understand what true Christianity is all about. So these events that are talked about here are all about the day of the Lord. Last days kicks it all off. The Spirit of God did come. The day of Pentecost did happen. The prophesying, the dreams, the visions, the miracles, all of those things absolutely happened. Then it says the wonders and the signs of heaven above. So the atmosphere is going to be altered and changed, and all of these dynamics are going to happen. But I want you to notice verse 21, and then we'll head back. And it shall come to pass. Now you're realizing this is still futuristic here. Whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Same way as he says in Romans chapter 10 about you and I. Whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. They get saved the same way as us. Faith in Jesus Christ and a transformation is going to happen. New man in Christ, just like you and I. Let's head back and we'll close down the chapter in Revelation now. Again, it's Revelation 6 where we're heading to. Just a quick cross-reference. Hebrews describes that Christ is greater than everything. Greater than the law, greater than the priest, greater as Melchizedek was to Abraham, greater than everything. It's interesting, one of the things that he talks about is that Christ, in relationship to his creation, the earth, I'm going to read the text. And thou, Lord, in the beginning hast laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the works of thine hands. They shall perish. This is Hebrews 1:11. The earth is going to perish, but thou remainest. They shall wax old as doth a garment. That's the earth is getting old according to Hebrews. And that's why we believe in a young earth that is getting old really fast, rather than billions and billions of years, and now because man is messing up and hurting the ozone layer and throwing plastic in the ocean, now we're all going to die. And they're blaming these circumstances and things, and bottom line is, now Hebrews says this whole place is getting old, and it's just like a cloth. You know, you can only mend it so many times until eventually it's rotted. And that's what he's saying the earth is like. And it's getting really old. And the vesture shalt thou fold them up, and they shall be changed. That's the new heaven and earth. But thou art the same, and thy years shall not fail. So God is saying this earth that we live in is getting old. It's corrupting. It's getting worse and worse. We're not talking about people. He's talking about the earth, the whole atmosphere, everything that we live in. God is saying, hey guys, guess what? One day it's going to be done. And just like this rotted old cloth, it's like, well, time to fold this thing up and put it away. It's no good anymore. That's what God's going to do with the earth. And then he's going to make a new heaven and a new earth. He got it. So, that all being said, look at chapter 6. We talked about verse 12, about the sun and moon. But then it says these meteors are going to come down. Stars of heaven fell upon the earth, under the earth. A fig tree casts her untimely figs. In other words, they're blowing. It's like they're not fully ripened, so they're kind of hard, and the wind's hitting them, though, and they're just falling right down out of the tree. And that's what God is going to say about these stars. It's as though God is bringing this wind, and unnaturally, these meteors are going to be coming down and smacking into the earth all over the place. And so it's untimely. It's like, why would this be happening? Now listen, this is the key. You know, they showed us, what was it, last year, you know, we had this eclipse, you know, and everybody was watching this eclipse. They knew at 2:22 in the afternoon, you could look up and see the full eclipse. They knew it. It's like, here's where it's going to happen. We're watching it all happen. By the way, these are not going to be able to be registered. They're going to be like, we didn't see this coming. We should have seen all of these meteors. You know, we couldn't warn you ahead of time. We didn't know this was happening. They'll talk about, hey, by the way, you're going to see these meteor showers at this time of the year. These are going to be coming. It's like, this is not when they're supposed to be coming. And they shouldn't be hitting us. So the people are going to be panicking. They can't get on the news and say, oh, this is exactly what's going on. The world is going to be confused. They're not going to understand anything because this is God doing it, not just nature happening. This is intentional by God. Verse 14, the heaven departed as a scroll. It's as though these stars and everything is darkened. It's like, what is happening? It's as though it's rolled together. The mountain and islands, notice Hawaii, or wherever your favorite place would be to go, they're going to be moved out of their places. It's so they're just being shaken and moved. Wow. And then the kings of the earth, this is the people, the rich, they're in their palaces, great men, rich men, chief captains, the mighty men. And then we deal with the opposite, the bondmen, and every free man. They hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains. And they're talking to the mountains. It's like, rocks, fall on us, hide us from the face of him that sits on the throne, from the wrath of the Lamb. The great day of the wrath of the Lamb has come, and who shall be able to stand? I had already mentioned this text early on when we studied this, so I don't need to repeat it. But it's interesting. I do believe some are going to become believers as a result of these catastrophes. I really believe that. But sadly, the majority won't. And we showed you the text where later on they begin to blaspheme God because of all this stuff that's happening. They're going to know, oh, this is the wrath of the Lamb. This is what these believers are going around, this 144,000 Jewish men and all these people all over the earth. They're talking about God's bringing this down. They're hearing these messages, but they're not believing it. And they're going to be blaming God, shaking their fists at God, and blaspheming his name. How hardened the heart of man can be. I mean, when catastrophe happens to you and I, the first thing we say is, Lord, I'm sorry. You know, it's like, Lord, are you correcting me? Do I need to get something right with you? Lord, I want to yield to you. That's our spirit, not shaking our fists. It's like, how dare you make my life miserable? And as I've mentioned, it's sad that I'm hearing some Christians acting that out, blaming God for their calamities and the problems that they're going through, and it's almost like they're shaking their fist at God. My friend, I wouldn't go there. I'm just saying, that is not a Christian perspective of God. We say God is good all the time God is good, right? But do we mean that? And that's what God is trying to say to you and I. We should reflect that mindset that no matter what, the Lord is good and he's got a plan, and all things work together for good to those that love God, those that are called according to his purpose, and he's trying to work all things out for good for you and I. He's going to take all this mess, and somehow God's going to say, see, this is why I did it. So-and-so got saved. Or you learned a lesson. Now you're more Christ-like. Whatever it is, God has a plan in it all. And ours is just to yield to him. He is the potter. We are the clay. He's doing something. And he will be doing something at this time period too. And people are going to believe. It's interesting how God says when people get saved, there's great rejoicing up in heaven. And one day we're going to be up there and we're going to be hearing, hey, another group got saved. Yay! We're going to be shouting up in heaven all the time. Yay, another person. Oh, they just died. Hey, welcome up. Welcome to heaven. They just died. And absent from the body is still, they're going to be present with the Lord. They're going to be ushered right into glory. And we're going to see these people. There's going to be a burden on their heart because they're going to remember and they're going to know what's happening still down on the earth. And we're going to be witnessing them crying, going under this altar, weeping for those. And we are, of course, like, hey, 7 years, we know when it started, we know when it's going to end. Trust me, hang in there. Jesus is going to take care of everything. He's going to make everything right. Lord, you're amazing. Your word is amazing. There is no way man could have thought of this. This book is your inspired word that you have given to us in our English language. And that's amazing. That we have the completeness of your word. We know it's the world's beginning, and we know its end. And here we are in the middle. To help us to be faithful to the end. Help us as a church and all the churches that are represented here this night. Help us, Lord, to be what we need to be for you. And forgive us where we fail. Help us, Lord, to be the church that's on fire and in love with you, that holds fast to your word, doesn't take in or marry the philosophies of the world, that we will stay true to you. And thank you, Lord, for this time. I pray you'll take us all home safely, and we'll thank you for what you'll do. Pray it by faith and always according to your will. In Jesus' name, amen.